What is up, Pack-A-Day podcast members? Welcome into our weekly members Q&A. Thank you so much for being members, and thank you so much for being here. Excited to break down everything that's going on with this team right now, which is quite a bit. I know it is a lot to kind of take in at the moment. As Matt LaFleur said today, the injury list is quite extensive. Sounds like there's a lot of players battling through a lot of different injuries, which we pretty much knew. One of the key takeaways from the press conference is that Matt LaFleur did intimate that Marshawn Lloyd is in fact going to be done for the year. Not unexpected. Not unexpected at all based on the hamstring injury flaring up last week. So bummer there for him and bummer for the Packers. But a lot of other injury news. Sounds like they're going to give a lot of players throughout the course of this week. I'm a little bit worried that there's more players that we didn't hear about that could be hurt just based on Matt's comments. We know that Evan Williams is going to be given the week. Christian Watson is going to be given the week. Zach Tom's going to be given the week. Josh Jacobs sounds like he's still fighting through things. So a lot of injuries to sort through. Lots to figure out. Brenton Cox is in that conversation. We'll see what Colin Oliver does this week. I believe Colin Oliver and Brenton Cox decisions have to come on Saturday, is my belief on that. So we've got decisions on both of those players. Just a lot of stuff this week, and I would expect some transactions as well to help figure out, where they need some extra bodies. We know Michael will go on IR. That'll open up one spot. Maybe that's just Brenton Cox. But either way, lots to figure out. Josh Wiley coming back from the concussion. It's going to be interesting to see how they navigate all of these injuries that Green Bay is currently fighting through. All right, let's get to all of your wonderful chats. If you were here after the case, we do open this up to everyone after the chat is done being live. So make sure to check out those memberships if you want to get involved in the actual Q&A itself and be able to ask questions, etc. Z Sunrise, Andy, I was in full doom mindset after all the injuries and was pretty much on to next year. But now after learning we will be okay after the loss of Micah, I feel like it may be achievable. I just have this feeling the defense will rally and step up. Hoping Rashawn comes into Chicago swinging and the pass rush looks good still. My main worry is going into the playoffs is corner. Lock up the number 2 seed and make them come to Lambeau, and I still think we make it all the way. Hopefully we avoid the 49ers and Eagles because I don't like those matchups. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I'm with you in the overarching feel there of let's win the division first, beat Chicago this week, and try to give yourself that number 2 seed, and then see who comes to Green Bay and try to win those games. Either way, that first game, if you are the number 2 seed, is probably going to be against Chicago and Detroit, or Detroit, I should say. That's going to be a tough game no matter what. And then you'd probably have You'd probably have the winner of the 3 seed. So Philly could be a possibility. You could have the winner of the NFC South, or if both of the other games are upsets, you could have, Seattle or LA, whoever ends up as the 5 seed coming to town. But all those things are down the road and one step at a time. First step is to beat Chicago, see if you can win the division, finish up strong against Baltimore and Minnesota, and then kind of go from there. But again, one game at a time, and hopefully, everything that Green Bay wants to do is still out in front of them. Just got a lot harder over the course of this past week. Has anyone ever asked Matt why Green Bay seems to break the huddle so late? Always seems like they snap the ball at 1 second left on the shot clock, waste timeouts or delay of game. I don't think it's been as much of an issue post Aaron Rodgers, but I do think it still happens from time to time. Green Bay is very much a team that wants to get up to the line and read defenses and either can or get to a different play. So not too much issue in getting to 1 on the play clock. That's going to happen based on how they're reading defenses. You don't want to do it religiously. You don't want to do it regularly. I'm sure part of the issue too with the long play calls is a lot of times you are calling 2 plays and then you're calling play 1 and then play 2. And if you're canning play 1 going into play 2, so you got to have a couple different options there. I just think it's all part of the process. I don't believe delay of games have been that part of it, huge of a problem. I don't think timeouts have been that big of a problem. I know they had a couple of instances this past week where it wasn't ideal, but on the whole, just gut feel, I haven't exactly tracked it, but hasn't felt like a major issue to me. When we look at the defensive line right now, last year Clark was not good. We did not have Parsons. Gary was having a worse year. Devontae Wyatt was not what he was this year. And Igbari playing better. We're fine. I think that's a slightly optimistic view of it. Kenny was still solid. He didn't have his best year, but he was solid. And TJ Slayton was solid as well. And I think you still had Devontae Wyatt, who was solid. I think you had a little bit better of an interior. You might say Rashawn's having a better year this year, but remember, he's had a lot more advantageous looks with getting a lot more one-on-ones where he's not going to get that anymore. I would argue Rashawn was actually playing a little bit better last year than this year, given the circumstances. And then, Enigbari's fine, but LVN's given you kind of nothing so far this year and is clearly still a little bit banged up. I think it would be probably a little bit through rose-tinted glasses if we're saying Green Bay's in a better position now than they were a season ago on the defensive line, even, not including Micah. But it's close, at least, and Green Bay still was a top 10 defense without Micah last year. We'll see if they can kind of replicate that this year. They're going to have to if they want any real shot at this thing. The Parsons injury is a really good reminder. While going all in does not ever guarantee you anything, especially when you are Super Bowl ready, it is a massive, massive gamble. Yeah, we talked about that pre-Parsons, and then as soon as it happened as well, no matter what, you're putting a lot of resources into one player. And I talked about it before doing the deal multiple times, saying, hey, you go all in and trade 2 first-round picks and a bunch of money, and they snap an ACL or, pop an Achilles. You now have invested a ton into that player. Now, the good news is we have seen players pop back from these ACL injuries better than ever. Christian Watson is an unbelievable example of that. In fact, Christian's come back from injury in the ACL gives me a lot of faith that when Micah does come back, he's going to be Micah. Or in Christian's case, he looked even better than the previous version of Christian Watson. But that's a scary thought, right? So that's the one good thing. If it's an Achilles, sometimes those are almost like, it takes another year for you to kind of get back and used to the way that you were playing. So at least it wasn't that. But yeah, there's a lot of resources that you're putting into one player. As you can tell, all throughout the season, he was more than worth it. But again, one injury, and that changes everything really, really quick. Happy Tuesday, Andy. Dozens of questions, but most are better for the offseason. Mainly, what to know what you thought about Stranger Things. Bears week part 2 and probably decides 2 and 7 seeds. Go Pack Go. Sorry, I don't know why I couldn't read that. Most hated Chicagoan. Stranger Things the season or Stranger Things the play? I did go see the play in New York as well. The play was interesting. Special effects were great. The story was a bit, it was fine. I didn't think it really captured the feel of the show a lot of times. There was some stuff that did, some stuff that didn't, but there were a couple moments that took place in the play that, just based on what I've seen so far, I think are going to have some pretty significant impact for what happens even in these last few episodes. I won't spoil anything for the show or what this season has looked like so far. But I've been I love everything about Stranger Things, rewatching it now with the kids. So we're through episode 5 of season 1, rewatching it, and just finished up the 4 episodes that they've done so far. And now anxiously awaiting, Christmas Day for the next, what is it? 3 episodes, 3 and then 2, I think. So yeah, it's crazy that in the next, 15, 16 days, it's all gonna be done. But they've done a great job with the show, hoping they can stick the landing, because it's, every great show has that burden, is if you can stick the landing or not. If they do it, to me, it could go down as one of the greatest series of all times, if not for me, the greatest. And if they don't, it just is one of those where you're just like, oh, never want to go through and watch that again. So yeah, huge few days or, a couple weeks coming up for Stranger Things here. People talking about Oliver as a post-Micah bright spot, but not as much talk about Sorrell. I've watched the video of him cooking Darnell Wright 20 times to cope. Excited to see more snaps. Yeah, Sorrell should get an opportunity. I still think there's a better chance that Colin Oliver goes back on injured reserve, if I had to guess. But we'll see if he can practice more this week and maybe get involved. Maybe the injury to Micah changes the calculus on that a little bit. But right now, I think Sorrell has a much better opportunity to make an impact and obviously be active than Colin Oliver, where even if they do activate Oliver, there's no guarantee. In fact, I'd be willing to bet he's probably not active for game days coming up. So that's going to be an interesting decision, but Sorrell in a much better place to get active and to potentially, play more snaps. Been a tough week with the loss of Parsons, Watson, etc. We all need some positivity from St. Louis. Became a Packers fan when the cranky crew screwed the city over and left town. Packers have everything. Great history, awesome fan base, exciting team, the greatest ownership group, bar none. Lots of people from St. Louis are Packers fans for this reason. Most sports teams are a drain on their communities. Billionaires siphon money from taxpayers and fans. Economic studies have shown this. Packers actually contribute to the community. I'm taking my kid to the Ravens game next week. We won't see Parsons play, but we'll still get to watch the greatest team in the world. Packers are something special. Take the time and enjoy it. That's great perspective, John. And as I've been talking about, we only get 17 of these things guaranteed. So hopefully we, can enjoy these last 3. Hopefully that kicks off at least one more game, if not more than that. And I'm still going to enjoy the hell out of the rest of the season. It's a bummer, and still, finding ways to, kind of deal with the loss of Micah Parsons and all the other injuries that Green Bay is dealing with. But maybe there's an evolution that comes out of this. Maybe they gain something out of it. Maybe it makes them stronger. We'll see. And hopefully they can come out the better side of it. But a great perspective overall. The big difference from the Rodgers years is that we knew he could pull out the cape, be Superman, and carry the team when needed. Big challenge ahead for Love as a player and a leader. This is going to sound disparaging to Aaron when it's not meant to be. He had the ability to pull out that cape, but it was really when they had the most well-rounded team in 2010, when he didn't have to put on the cape, that they won it all. And when he had to put on the cape, it wasn't good enough to just inherently win a Super Bowl. In fact, they never got back to it. So while I agree with you, and while he was that good, and still I think, his prime was as good, if not better, than any quarterback play I've ever seen in my life, that Superman cape in and of itself does not get you to the promised land. It gives you a puncher's chance every year, but we know it just doesn't guarantee anything. So I still think, well, yes, Jordan's going to have to play some of his best football. If Green Bay ultimately wants to win this thing, it's not just Jordan. It's not Jordan putting on the cape and saying, I got this, guys. I'll win us every game. It's not going to work that way. It's going to take Rashawn Gary and LVN stepping up at defensive end, and everyone on that defense doing their job, the offense playing better, playing complementary football, winning the turnover battle, doing the things that we know Green Bay can do, but doing it to a more consistent level without arguably their best player. I did make this joke with Nagler the other day as well. Unfortunately, he is not. A better place is in the starting lineup. Just our luck. Rasul Douglas, as of yesterday, was the 5th rated coverage cornerback on PFF. Yeah, I'll eat the L on this one. And it's not even so much of eating the L as it just was go and watch his tape from last year in Buffalo. It was brutal. It was really, really bad. I mean, really bad. That's not a hot take. That's not me getting that opinion wrong. It's just go out and watch it. And it was really bad. And I think he would probably tell you his tape was not great in Buffalo. So expecting that he's going to go to a worse team with more responsibility, with the other team throwing the ball more, and he's going to have a resurgent, unbelievable season, it's insane. Like, you would never see that coming. But kudos to Rasul. He's had an awesome season. I'm shocked that nobody traded for him at the trade deadline. He was injured at the time, so maybe that played a bit of a factor into it. But he would have been such a smart trade deadline candidate for a variety of different teams, Green Bay included. But yeah, he's had an unbelievable season, and kudos to him for that. Twitter tells me Colin Oliver is our savior now, so things really are this bleak. Yeah, again, I don't think he ends up getting activated, if I'm being honest. But I hope I'm wrong, and I hope he goes out and balls out. If Tom is out, do you think we could pick up Mercedes Lewis for the 6 offensive lineman package? Don't think it'd be effective with our current tight ends or Morgan. I tweeted this yesterday that it could be worthwhile. I think the issue with this, and the reason why, again, there could be a variety of reasons it doesn't happen, but the main one is if you sign him off of the practice squad from Denver, you're committing to him for 3 weeks. And that's a pretty significant period of time to commit to him when you have a lot of roster stuff in flux right now. And Wiley probably isn't a long-term injury with a concussion. So I don't think so. If I had to guess, one thing I think that they could potentially do, this isn't a guess, I shouldn't say that this is a guess, but one player to kind of keep an eye on, or maybe even a couple players to keep an eye on. Dalton Cooper, who is a backup offensive lineman for Green Bay on their practice squad. He is 6'5", 326. He probably fits that, sort of more big physical offensive line, offensive lineman, kind of like Darian Kennard, probably better than just about anybody else. So I could see them potentially activating him off the practice squad as a call up, not as a 53. They have 3 weeks of call ups left, right? So, and he hasn't used any of them. Fat Green Bay lists him at 6'6", 326. So he's a bigger dude. That could be one player that, because I don't think Monk is that guy. If you look at Jacob Monk, he's 6'3", 308. And honestly, that might be generous. He always seems on the lighter side. Donovan Jennings is listed at 6'4", 323, but he always looks a little bit more on the lighter side to me as well. Jordan Morgan's not that guy. So, and I don't think they have the tight end either. So maybe they go with a player like that. Now, I've not seen Dalton Cooper play, so I don't know if that would be something that would be good or not. But that could be an option. Maybe Brant Banks. He's on the lighter side, but he is 6'7". So that could be another player. But my guess is it comes in house because they don't want to give 3 weeks of Mercedes Lewis on the roster. And Lewis has been okay in Denver, but not great. My guess is they don't go in that direction, but I did float that idea as well yesterday. Glad Mike explained the muscle exhaustion nature of ligament tears. Makes sense. The lack of other pass rush means that half couldn't. The lack of other pass rush means that half couldn't. I don't know what that means. No quick wins from others. 0 miles per hour every play. Tough. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly on that one, John, but obviously, again, Micah's going to be a huge, huge loss for this team, and trying to replace him or even just mitigate the loss is going to be extremely difficult. Do you think they will leverage Cooper in more pass rushing situations? Not as a pure pass rusher, no, but as a blitzer, yes. You might say, well, what's the difference? I don't think they're going to line him up like Micah Parsons as a defensive end and say, go rush the passer. Do I think they'll utilize Edgerrin Cooper more as a blitzer? Yes, I think they will. From depth, bringing him as an extra man, double A-gap blitzes, twists and stunts. Those are the things where you want to use Edgerrin Cooper. Your goal with Cooper is to get him as a free rusher. You want him using his pure, unmitigated speed to get to the quarterback. You don't want him to necessarily have to beat somebody. But I do think they'll scheme up more looks for him to try to get on a running back or to just use that speed as a free rusher to try to get to the quarterback as quickly as possible. Fine with the shot versus Surtain, but if you're aggressive, why the tight end screen and runs in the red zone before half? Tight end there may change the game in a real way. Is Matt LaFleur being conservative or poor clock management? Yeah, so the difference in those is before halftime, Matt manages, and he's been consistent managing this way. I don't like it at all, if I'm being honest, but he's been consistent in he's managing it like an NBA team would, where we're getting the last shot. Meaning in the NBA, if you've got, 23 seconds left on the clock and you've got an opportunity to maybe go and get a layup or something like that, maybe you take the layup or whatever, but you're not going up until there's like 5 or 4 seconds left so that you get the last shot. And the reason is because if you make the layup and they come down and hit a 3, you have -1 points from that possession. If you hold for the last shot, the only thing that can happen is good things, meaning there's no way of the other team scoring and you're going to get a shot. And if it goes in, great. If not, we break even. And Matt has managed these end of half scenarios like an NBA game where he's saying, I am making sure that no matter what, I'm not giving you the ball back. We're going to bring this down. If we get an opportunity at a touchdown, great, which I think they did the week before, if I remember correctly, right? But either way, he has managed it so that there would be very minimal time left on the clock. So that's why he went the tight end screen. And to be fair to Matt, I thought the tight end screen could have been executed much better. If Emmanuel Wilson makes that block, I think they get a lot more yardage out of it. And to be fair, on the draw to Emmanuel Wilson, there looks like there's a pretty big hole to the left side that Wilson just missed and kind of ran into the defense. I think if his guys execute a little bit better there, and specifically if Emmanuel Wilson executes better, it's a non-story. I think they still have the opportunity to go down and score a touchdown. They didn't execute the plays, which is a bigger issue, but I did feel like he took his foot off the gas a little bit to make sure that the opposing team would not have any time to score no matter what. And in doing so, he limited his opportunity at a touchdown and more made it to get a field goal or bust. I disagree with it. I can at least understand the vision, and he's at least been very consistent with it, which means they have a plan for that situation. So I think that's what it ultimately comes down to. If the Packers fall short of their ultimate goal, do you think Hafley would come back to give it another shot, kind of like Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn did in Detroit following their 2023 loss? No, I think this is all just going to come down to whether or not Jeff Hafley gets a head coaching offer that he deems as a good situation. I think there's a chance. I mean, a game like this past week, that was not a great game for the defense. They've had this is not, even with Micah, an unquestioned like top 5 defense. So it's been a good year for Jeff, but I don't think it's been an unbelievable year where it's just like, yes, clearly he's one of the new hot up and coming guys that nobody can, that everyone's going to interview and things like that. I don't think he's on the level of, desirability that Ben Johnson was. And because of that, I don't think Hafley has the ability to say no to as much as Ben Johnson did. You're not guaranteed another offer in the NFL at head coach. If he gets offered the Giants job or whatever job comes available and he says no, he might never get one again. So I think if he gets one, he'll take it. I don't think there's going to be anything of like, well, we finished just short, I'm going to come back and play or, coach another. I don't think there's anything like that, nor should there be. But if he wants to, great. But I think if he gets the head coaching job, especially if it's one that he wants, I think he takes it 100 times out of 100. Let's see. Demovsky mentioned on the radio that he has heard that policy will give the power to hire, fire the coach back to the GM. How do you think that impacts things? Seems like Goody LaFleur have a good relationship. Yeah, I have to dig into that a little bit more, and I'll have to kind of find that out and maybe talk to Rob about that as well, or see if I can find the conversation on that. I think ultimately that's a good thing. And I think that's if that's true, it's a huge sign for the organization. I said, well, what does that mean? It means that Ed Policy wants even less meddling into things than, Mark Murphy did. And Mark Murphy didn't meddle all that much at all. Because really, if that's the situation, Ed Policy is giving up power. Right now, Ed Policy has say over the salary cap side by overseeing Russ Ball, the coaching side by overseeing Matt LaFleur, and the GM side by overseeing Brian Gutekunst. And he's saying, I'm giving all of that autonomy to the general manager. I'm taking less power. So Brian, this is your show now, fully and completely. If you're not a fan of something from a salary cap standpoint, assuming this is also a Russ Ball thing, and it's not just a coaching thing. If you're not a fan of something from a salary cap standpoint, that's your call. Russ reports to you. You don't like something from a coaching standpoint, that's your call. Matt reports to you. I love that overall. Now it puts a lot of eggs in Brian Gutekunst's basket. Your mileage may vary on how you feel about that, but I generally tend to believe that that's a little bit of a better structure. And we'll see what that means. We'll see what that means for Matt too. Matt's for all the talk of should they fire Matt, you should probably be more concerned with Matt's a free agent in a year. After this season, he's a free agent. It swings pretty quick to being like, you need to make sure he wants to come back as well. I think that he does. But if now he has to report to Goody, and depending on what Green Bay's offering from a salary standpoint, and if he felt, overall that this was something that they're not treating him fairly or giving him the right offer, that he was on the hot seat, maybe he says, I'm going to go coach college, or I'm going to coach a different NFL team. I'll see you guys later. So that dynamic gets interesting, but I'll need to do a little bit more research on that. So Schefter just tweeted out about Marshawn Lloyd as well. He didn't really add anything there. In fact, he called him a second round pick when he was a third. So no update there. Bummer about Marshawn Lloyd though, for sure. It is Tuesday and I'm still super bummed. Also, glad we're done with the altitude talk. It's elevation. Yes, Pat could still go on a run, though it is harder. Just beat the Bears. I'm with you, Ben. It's been a rough week, but we're on to Chicago. Mike Wall talked about the players having to step up for this team to make a run. Who do you think are those players in both offense and defense? Yeah, I don't think I'm going to have any sort of hot takes here. LVN and Rashawn Gary and Igbare are going to be huge at defensive end. No question about it. I think Carl Brooks needs to step up as a pass rusher on the interior. I think they need to weaponize Xavier McKinney and Edgerrin Cooper even more. I think the corners are going to be in more one-on-one situations. So Nixon and Valentine and Javon Bullard in the slot going to have to step up. Nate Hobbs, when he's in there, going to have to step up a ton. I think offensively, I don't think there's anybody in particular, but I still think the offensive line needs to play a lot better, and the special teams in general and in totality need to play a lot better as well. There's still a lot of improvement opportunities there for Green Bay, and if they can get some of that stuff right, play more complementary football, get a few more turnovers, it's all still out there in front of them. But your margin for error just got a lot more thin. Mike said that he thinks only 5 to 6 plays a game are won or lost based on scheme. If so, how do coaches make such a big difference? Halfley versus Barry, more so on the actual coaching side. Yeah, again, I think there's more to it from what a coach brings to the table than just scheme. I think sometimes it's matching scheme to players. So making sure that the players in your scheme are set up to be successful in the scheme that you're asking them to run. I think sometimes it's coaching those players to play to the scheme that you want them to play. Anyone can install a scheme. It's another thing to get the players to play that scheme at a high enough level. Joe Barry could have had the exact same playbook and scheme as Jeff Halfley, but if he can't get the buy-in from the players, and if he can't explain to them to play it at the level that they need to explain it at and install it in the way that they need to, it doesn't matter all that much. And I'm not saying that's what happened, but I'm just saying there's so much more to being a defensive coordinator than just saying, here's the plays we're going to use, and here's the play I'm going to call on this given play. So getting buy-in, putting players in the right positions to be successful, and then knowing when to call certain plays from that playbook, sequencing those plays in the right way and in the right situations and scenarios goes a long way as well. So it's all encompassing. It's not just one thing in installing a scheme that the defensive coordinator does. They've got to be good at all of it to make sure that thing comes together the way that you want it to come together. Richard, thank you for the chat. Surtain is one of my favorite non-Packers players to watch. Dream of having a guy like that in the secondary. Defense would look insane. Good luck. There's a couple of them out there at best, and he's probably the one of one. And you have no way to acquire that player unless you get lucky in the draft and somehow can find a way to pick a guy up like that in the second round, which is not easy to do. So yeah, it's tough to find a player like that. But at the end of the day, he's a phenomenal player, and I'm right there with you. One of my favorite non-Packer players to watch as well. He was rumored to be part of the Broncos Rodgers package if we were to take a few first round picks. Yeah. That's an interesting conversation to go back and look at some point. Very interesting what if. Andy, with Parsons being out, how many additional points a game does that offense need to score to feel like we have a good chance at winning? Yeah, I just think they need to live in that 27 to 28 point range more often than not, which you kind of felt like anyway. But to me, where this gets more complicated, if Green Bay goes out and plays well on offense, or it's a back and forth game and the offense can stay balanced, that they can go out and beat anybody. Where I think things get a lot more challenging is if the defense starts off playing poorly, which we've seen the defense actually start off really well in recent games. If the defense starts out poorly and the opposing team gets off to like a 14-3 lead and the offense starts off a little bit sputtering, now you're behind the 8 ball where teams are, pinning their ears back, rushing against your offensive line that's been really up and down and probably more down than up through the course of the year. And that's where I get a little bit more afraid. I think that the two areas where it concerns you is, again, defense getting you in bad situations early, and then at end of games where, you're up by 2 and they get the ball at their own 30. Can you get off the field before they get the field goal attempt? Or you're up by 4 and they get the ball at the 35 and they need a touchdown to score. Can you stop them? Those are the scenarios where I'm a little bit more worried. I think through the course of the game, Green Bay is going to be in a lot of close games still. They're going to put up points. The other team's going to put up points. We're probably going to see some very fun football, but the margin for error is much less. And your ways that you could win, I think, go way down. Like, it's going to be much harder to win a defensive oriented game, like the Eagles game, right? The Eagles game, the defense kept you around as long as they possibly could, giving the offense every opportunity to go down and score points. Now going back, if you play that game without Micah Parsons, Green Bay's offense only scored 7, instead of 10, maybe Philly gets 23. And that's a 23-7 game. Now, it's still a loss either way, but the point being is you had a lot of opportunities to still come back and win where in a situation where your defense is not playing quite as well, now maybe you don't. Again, just it changes the calculus on how many ways that you can win a football game. If Evan Williams is out for this game, are they putting Bullard back at safety with Hobbs in the slot? Or are they keeping Bullard in the slot and Zane Anderson at the other spot? It's a great question, Ian Lowe, and I don't know the answer on how that will go. What I will say is I expect there to be a lot of 4-3. So I expect McDuffie, Quay and Cooper to play a lot. And in that look, I expect Bullard to be a lot in safety. And then if I had to guess, I think in the more obvious nickel passing situations, it would be Hobbs in the slot, assuming he's good to play. He got a little bit banged up in that game as well, with Nixon and Valentine on the outside and Bullard and, McKinney at safety. But they could also go, with a situation where, it's Zane Anderson at safety and Bullard still in the slot. I think if you're getting your best five, it's more Hobbs in slot and Bullard at safety. You also could look, if you're going nickel in more run situations, with putting Bullard in the slot still. And I would try Kitano Ladapo at safety. He's a big physical safety. He can come down and help stop the run as well. But maybe Zane Anderson too. There's a couple different ways that they could go. The good news here is they have a lot of options with what they could do defensively in this game. Really feel bad for Lloyd. I'm sure he's desperate to be out there. So hoping we can see a full season of him next year. I think he can be special. Yeah, sucks all the way around. And he's working his ass off to try to get back and play. And it just hasn't worked out for him. And that's a brutal situation. Top 100 pick for both the player and the team, where you're expecting a lot. He's a really talented player and he just can't get out on the field. Hopefully they can get it figured out and he can be an impact player in 2026. Reminds me of Bakhtiari tearing his ACL right before a crucial playoff run. Green Bay's had some bad injury luck right before playoffs have started. That's for sure. And this is certainly another example of that. Andy, as the dust is settled, I still see a path. Give me hope that I'm not just delusional. There's absolutely a path. I mean, they're not eliminated from playoff contention. They're not eliminated from the playoffs. Everything's out there still in front of them. A 4-game run in this playoffs was going to be exceedingly hard with Micah Parsons. Now it gets a lot harder without him. Could you do it? Sure. But they're going to have to play their best football in 4 consecutive games. Probably get a little, turnover luck, a little injury luck, a couple things bouncing their way. But yeah, they can do it. It just, the odds of it went down. The opportunity to do it is less, but it's still there. It's absolutely still there. So hyped for 2026. So many good players coming back to the squad. Should be an interesting offseason to see how they navigate this. Which players are back, which players are gone. Which players they invest more in for the future, which players they try to bring in probably on some cheap free agent deals, how they navigate the draft with no first round pick. Going to be really interesting to see how Green Bay navigates all of that. They're going to be able to put a very good team together still, though. We were Super Bowl hopefuls before, Micah. I'm trying to find ways to donate my ACL just like everyone else, but can you help me understand the doom and gloom? Offense is still solid, have guys on D, etc. Yeah, we've obviously talked about it quite a bit. There's an opportunity there. There's a pathway there. It's just, it's slim, You were hoping for multiple ways in which you could win playoff games, including with your defense. I think that became a lot harder. So when you have a force multiplier like Micah Parsons, it's a bit of a cheat code at times, gives you a variety of different ways to win games, and you just lost that huge piece. And I think it's, the doom and gloom is, it's not that it's just Micah. You've got all of these other injuries that are happening right now too, to different extents. But it's also, you've already lost Devontae Wyatt, Tucker Kraft, Elton Jenkins, Marshawn Lloyd, etc. And those accumulative injuries are adding up as well, where it's just, you're getting watered down from what your potential was. And that really sucks. That really, really sucks. Just want to beat Chicago. That would be a great uplifting win for the team and the fans. Yep, one game at a time. Beat Chicago first, go on from there. I'm a bit more optimistic. I run to the NFC Championship game or Super Bowl, and we'll all look back and say how proud we were of the 2025 Packers for all the obstacles they overcame. Yeah, we talked about this. Actually, I talked about it with Nagler for Let's Talk Football. Some of my favorite moments and some of the best moments of this franchise are when teams count and fans and media counted them out and said, you can't do it. 2010 is a pretty solid example of that, where Rodgers just went down hurt and they lost to the Patriots, and the Patriots offensive linemen's almost returning a kick for a touchdown, and everything was looking pretty bleak. I think they were 8-6 at the time, and they win their final two, get to 10-6, get a brutal. They had to go to Philly, to Atlanta, to Chicago, and then face Pittsburgh in the Super Bowl. That's a tough run of games. And they navigated it. They took one at a time. They beat all of them, and the rest was history. Now, this would have been akin to losing Charles Woodson with 3 games left and not having him for the entire playoff run, which would have changed that. But hey, all you can do is, go out there and play to the best of your ability. The Super Bowl equity is down, but there's still an opportunity there. Taking a step back or something I missed, or is losing Micah the cherry on top of losing Kenny, Elton, Devontae, Tucker, etc. be tough, but I still believe we have the guys to make a run. Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that it's a lot of players that are out. That, again, it's the cumulative effect of losing all of those guys. What is your take on Rashawn Gary? Will this open the door for Sorrell and Oliver? Again, I don't think Oliver is going to get activated, but I'll gladly be wrong if that's the case. Sorrell's probably a little bit more dependent on what happens with Brenton Cox, meaning I think there's an opportunity for Brenton Cox to get activated and potentially play. And if that's the case, they'll have to choose between Brenton Cox and Barron Sorrell for that final spot on game days. So that'll be interesting, but he should have opportunities for sure. My take on Rashawn Gary is that he's a good, solid football player who is a plus player for this team, who's an added value, who's been really good against the run, who has not been good enough against the pass as a pass rusher, who has not lived up to the expectations of his contract or his draft status. And because of that, will always be looked upon as maybe some level of disappointing. I think he has gone through his career and at different times has been overrated and at different times has been underrated. And I think what you've ended up with is just a really good, sound number 2 defensive end who's really good against the run and is okay as a pass rusher. And that will never live up to the hype or the expectations of the pick or the contract. And I think now you have to make a decision going into next year of, do you want him back on that contract? And the Micah injury, of course, changes the thought process on that as well to some extent. What I will say right now is, with Rashawn Gary and LVN, this is their opportunity to go out and show what they're ultimately capable of. This is a referendum, and even trading for Micah was really a referendum on not getting the ROI that you wanted on Rashawn or LVN. If Rashawn and LVN were as good as you expected, you never need to trade for Micah, but you did. And the fact that there is this much panic and angst and anxiety over losing Micah tells you kind of what you need to know about the state of your defensive end room with LVN, Rashawn, and Micah and the rest of them with him being out. Everyone's panicked about not having enough pass rush. Well, if you have 2 first-round picks and a player that's an upcoming free agent that is probably going to get paid, and you don't think those 3 can get enough, well, you have your answer. You probably need to start looking in a different direction. That's, again, not to say he's a bad player or anything like that, but this next few games and hopefully playoffs will tell a lot about where you're at from a defensive end standpoint, sans Micah Parsons. Also secretly hoping for a win in Bears-Lions Sunday Night Football in Week 18. Could be, I think we're going to end up, I mean, you could get that either way, but I think Panthers and Bucks is probably going to end up being the primetime game for that Sunday. But hey, if it's Bears-Lions, it could easily be that as well. Will, thank you so much for that. Happy to do it. And it's certainly a blessing and a really fun exercise to get to do it every single week. Have you watched some film? Really curious how the defense got torched so bad. I am behind at the moment. So tonight, tomorrow, and probably early Thursday are going to be my big film days. Got a lot of catching up to do still from being out last week. And, with the holidays coming up and a bunch of stuff. So we're still trending for a Thursday afternoon grades episode and film review, though. LaFleur said anything's possible when Spoon asked about the jumbo package and if he considered putting Morgan at right tackle, at least for those specific snaps. What's your ideal plan here if Tom doesn't go? Yeah, I would probably still start Kennard at right tackle. And then I kind of mentioned it earlier. I'd probably be looking to bring up Dalton Cooper at 6'6", 326 is a player that maybe could do a little bit of that. Again, not I haven't seen Cooper, so maybe just isn't capable of doing it, but somebody like that. The other game, just a few days ago, they were down to 6 snaps. This was even before the Zach Tom injury of the jumbo look. So they weren't using a ton of it as of late anyway. I don't think it's that big of a deal. And if you need to cut out the 6 plays, it's not the end of the world. Ralph, thank you for the super chat. Just pray to God this doesn't affect him like Gary. It won't. It won't. I mean, the big thing is pray that it doesn't affect him like Bakhtiari. But no, it won't. He's going to come back as strong as ever. I really, truly believe that. Why did Matt LaFleur challenge that call? All of America knew it was a catch. Thank you for doing these and everything else you and the team do. Go Pack Go. Appreciate you, Kipperoni. Yeah, it looked like a bad challenge all the way around. I don't know. I don't know if he got bad information from the booth or if it was a rage challenge, which we've seen him do before, but definitely a dumb waste of a timeout in that situation. Ben, you got to start. You got to start over. Get into it. I think it's phenomenal. D needs the O to use up the 30-second clock as much as possible. Maybe that's the case. GB Gary. 67 pressures for Parsons, 67 for the other 5 players. Great job drafting Goody. Well, the first thing is that LVN's been out. I don't think that would change all that much, to be honest, but he has been out, hasn't been able to play as much. Second, to some real extent, this defense is set up to dictate, Micah being your top rusher, although he's obviously getting a lot of double and triple teams as well. And to your larger point, the rest of the group does just need to be better. But I think if LVN and Wyatt had been healthy through the entire year, that would look a lot different. I really do. Just hasn't ultimately played out that way. We're about to see with LVN, Rashawn Gary, Inigbare, Brooks, Wooden, etc. What those guys can do, they're going to have to step up, and hopefully we see a little bit more pressure from that group. Do you think LVN can step up huge for the end of the season? I'm not holding my breath. RTX Nick, even LVN said on his tweet the other day that he's still battling through injury. That makes it tough. You can tell he's not at 100%. And 100% LVN wasn't a premium pass rusher anyway. So I'm not holding my breath on it, but hopefully he can come in and play some really good football the rest of the season. Brutal injuries. The season isn't over yet. We can't just write it off. I'm right there with you. Right there with you. Andy, I appreciate you keeping our spirits up after Sunday. I completely withdrew from everything football, but I'm back and ready to see this team moving forward. Love that, Hayden. Get back on the horse. Enjoy the football. There's only 3 Packers games left for sure. Hopefully it's more than that, but I'm ready to dig in, grind out these, not even grind out, enjoy these last few games and see what happens from here on out. On the bright side, can we start the narrative that Jeff Hafley was only good because of Micah and try to scare other teams away from him? I don't think he's guaranteed a head coaching job by any means. I really don't. I think he's going to get opportunities. I think he'll interview well, but I don't think it's his foregone conclusion that he gets a job. We'll see. We'll see. Are devastating losses like this easier or harder since you started covering the team? No, I think they're actually harder. So it's really interesting in the fact that through the course of a regular season, the ebb and flow affects me way less. It really doesn't bother. Like the wins and losses, it is not irrelevant as long as they're trending towards the playoffs and ideally winning the division to get some home playoff games. That's what I'm looking for. But they're going to win some, they're going to lose some, and it's going to take its normal course throughout the season. But almost because of that, really my hardcore kind of fandom comes out in these big moments. It's the playoffs. It's those moments where everything almost amps up even more, where like everything is just on the line. And we all have that feeling come postseason time, but it amps up even more. I think where I'm even keeled through the season, but now playoffs is on, the volume's turned all the way up. So when you have those big playoff moments or those devastating losses in the playoffs, those are just, mind-numbingly awful. And when you have moments like Micah Parsons going out for the year where you know how much it's going to affect their chances in those big playoff games, losses of Tucker Kraft, those are devastating. So I think for me, the season is always like a measure of Super Bowl equity. Where are they at? There's going to be times where it's a little bit, where it takes a dip. There's going to be times where it goes up, but a win or a loss doesn't change that equity for me that much. How they're playing in games changes that equity, and who they've lost along the way changes that equity. So, regular season starts and you're here, and then all of a sudden you lose Tucker Kraft and you're here, and then maybe you lose a couple bad games, and then you win some games and it's back up a little bit, and then all of a sudden you lose, Elton Jenkins, and then you lose Micah Parsons, and that equity just kind of goes down. So ultimately, that's where it's a bummer. And then when you ultimately lose those games in the playoffs in usually heartbreaking ways, it stings. It stings a lot. Does it take any more time to prep for a guest or an Andy only show? Usually Andy only show, just because it's all on me, right? With a guest, I can let them do more of the heavy lifting throughout the course of the show. I could get on and talk Packers. Like if you said right now, no moment's notice, you said, Andy, right now you have to talk Packers until midnight tonight. No breaks, no stopping. Wouldn't be an issue at all. Like sincerely would not be an issue at all. I could go without eating. I could go without going to the bathroom. I could know all the facts and everything. It would not be a problem. I could go now to midnight without stopping pretty simply. The only issue would be like picking up kids and things like that. I'd have to make a couple texts along the way. But in general, I have all the stuff I could talk about without it being much of an issue. But to prep for a guest episode is usually pretty quick, and just knowing what questions I want to ask and what things I want to go over. And then I can fill in with stuff I already know. When I'm prepping for like a 45-minute episode of just me talking, I want to make sure I've got a few more things that I definitely want to get to, a timeline more of how that episode's going to go, some facts and some figures, some things like that, to just be a little bit more, more prepared for a longer conversation. And then, the interesting thing is I twist my mind every single year of like, all right, the season's done with, now things will slow down. I don't have as many, guest episodes, and there's usually more like one episode per day, and it just, everything slows down a little bit, right? Well, it doesn't work that way, because in season, really from the start of training camp till the end of the year, all the information comes to me naturally. I don't need to go out and hunt for a topic. The Packers are playing, they're practicing, there's injuries, there's transactions, there's all this stuff that's happening. I don't need to think of a topic to talk about. It just naturally happens organically. In the offseason, if I want to talk about, hey, should the Packers sign John Franklin Myers? Well, I've got to go and spend hours researching John Franklin Myers and watching his tape and taking notes, and what does he do well and what does he not do well? What does that contract look like? That takes longer than anything that I'm going to do during the course of a season for an episode. If I want to say, like, who should the Packers take in the first round, or not in this case, the second round? Well, I've got to watch 60, 75 prospects before I feel comfortable telling you, here's who I want the Packers to draft in round 2. Once the Packers draft a player, I got to go and research that player even more. It takes a day sometimes just to research that player, to talk about him educatedly for that episode of doing the deep dive into him. And then you get into the doldrums, right? And the June period or July period where there's no football. And now you've got to really dig and think of some topics that are still going to be worthwhile, that people are going to want to tune into. And that takes a lot of time to put together. So it's just interesting where you would think, in season, and it is more chaotic in season in general, but you think that's going to be like, I can relax a little bit once the season's over. No, because you have to do more research to put together a 30 to 40 minute episode in the off season than it does take in the regular season. All right, I'm about to go really, really speed round because I got to get out of here in 10 minutes to talk to the Paul Farrington boys. Let's see. Just want to beat the Bears. Cheers, Andy. Alex, thank you so much. If the policy comment is true, it's fantastic. Yeah, we'll see. I'll keep an eye on that for sure. Said at the beginning, my worry was corner, but I also have a question to be answered. One thing you talk about that I side with is the win with or because of. So, Andy, do you think Jordan has it? I do. I think you can win because of Jordan Love. I think we've reached that point. I don't think it's like top 3 quarterback where you're automatically in the Super Bowl conversation, but I think if Green Bay wins a Super Bowl this year, it will be because of Jordan Love, primarily. I really, really do. I think he does, but can he do it consistently during a playoff run against great defenses? I think it's a great point. And he has to prove that still, in order to see it happen. No other defense in the league is quite like Denver's except Houston. Seattle and LA Rams have good defenses, but not quite to that level. Yeah, I think that's a fair evaluation. From one rough week to another, a W would be a surprise. I don't think it's a surprise. I think Green Bay will have every right to go into Chicago and win this game. The thing that was frustrating was Watson had a full step or two on Surtain. If Love wasn't hit, I think so too. I'm right there with you, Ben. I think if Love gets to step into that and isn't annihilated at the top of that play, I think he leads him and hits him for that touchdown. Yeah, it's a bummer about Lloyd. Andy, do you think Micah's injury impacts the way that we look at Gary coming into 2026? I don't think they can trade him now and go into next year with LVN, Sorrell, Cox, etc. Let's see here. Do you think Micah's injury impacts the way that we... Yeah, I talked about that a little bit earlier. I think it potentially could. I just realized too, I don't have Farrington until 3:15. That's what I was looking at. So I do have just a little bit more time here. I think they could trade him. I also think that it's possible that Micah's back for week 1 next year. I just think you have to take the Gary conversation on its own accord. Usually when you start lumping these things together is when you start making bad decisions. Your decision should be, is Rashawn Gary worth that amount of money? And what can you get for him in a trade? And if you don't think he's worth the money and you get something of value in the trade, then you make it. It's as simple as that. And then you figure out the rest of the defensive end room later. You also prepare for what that team will look like when you're making your run. And in order to make your run, you're going to have to get Micah back eventually anyway. So do you want Gary to be a part of that? Or are you better using those resources in some other way? I think that's how you have to look at that conversation. And so I don't think you let the Micah stuff impact it and you take it at its face value and make the decision on, is it a smart move to bring Rashawn Gary back at that price point? And then what can you get in return if you do try to trade him? Ike made LVN make a great response. I think we're about to see the demon unleashed in Chicago. I hope so. We could use a big LVN game. That'd be great. I'd say it depends on what LVN looks like the rest of the season after settling in from injury. Again, I think you take the Rashawn Gary on its own face value and let that be your deciding factor. If you're saying, well, we got to keep Rashawn because LVN's not good enough and because Mike is out, you don't compound the problem. You don't now add in another bad contract to the situation because you already have situations that are not ideal. You're just making a bad situation even worse. So I take that Gary situation. And if you want to bring him back, great. But just make it based on Gary's play and contract and trade value on its own accord, not taking that other stuff into consideration. My thing is, I don't want Bullard back at safety. I think he has a lot more value and balanced offensive snaps at slot. And I don't want Hobbs to see the field unless absolutely necessary. I think that's an oversimplification. I can understand the overall justification of it. I think Bullard's a good safety, so I have no issue with that. And I think Hobbs will be fine in the slot. I really do. But I think you're going to see a lot of Bullard at safety, a lot of 4-3 looks. And then I think you could see in obvious passing situations, Hobbs in the slot with Bullard at safety. But we'll have to wait and see. And Green Bay could go a lot of different ways with it. What's good, Andy? Just want to let everyone know that I'm boycotting Denver for the next 5 years in protest of Sunday. Stupid, no oxygen ass desert anyway. That's fine by me, RJ. I've never been. I was in Denver for a layover for a flight. That was my only time I was in Denver. Outside of that, never actually got to see the city. The O-line didn't skip a beat when Jenkins came in for 69. It would be a miracle if someone did the same in Parsons' absence. It'd be more than a miracle. It would be something beyond crazy. Like there's nobody that like Myles Garrett's the only Micah Parsons-esque player out there. You could put Crosby or Watt or somebody like that, but you can't fill that void. It's an impossibility. It's a non-starter. You can try to mitigate it as much as possible, but you can't replace it. Joking aside, you could absolutely tell the defense was gassed even earlier than normal. Peyton even mentioned it. Hope the strength staff addresses general conditioning in the offseason. Hasn't been great. I don't know how to break that down. It has felt like there's been times where this defense wears down relatively easily, but I can guarantee you all those guys are in great shape. So I don't know. Tough one to evaluate for me, to be honest, RJ. Andy, do I think Bohanna finally gets activated and next year in the draft, we better draft a few corners? I don't think our current crop is good enough. They'll definitely take at least a corner in the draft. I don't know if it's going to be corners, but they'll definitely take at least one. As far as Bohanna, it's tough to say where they evaluate him in the pecking order. All we know right now is that he's behind Riley. At least he was this last week. We'll see if they feel they need 5. He might get activated just because they don't even have, 48 guys that are healthy this week. But it also could be that they have to release a defensive tackle in order to make some space for some players that they need this week. And Bohanna or Stackhouse would be the ones that they'd have to release in that situation. We'll see. If Hafley does leave, is Christian Parker our guy? I would love to think so. I think he'd make a great defensive coordinator. I know he was a heavily favored candidate last time we were looking for a new defensive coordinator. At first glance, Ian, he would be my first choice. No question about it. Andy, do you think if we start losing because of the defense, this will hurt Hafley's chance? Absolutely. Absolutely, Clayton. But at the same time, if Micah goes down and Hafley gets his defense playing as a top 10 defense the rest of the way, it's going to enhance his resume. No question about it. This is a great opportunity for Gary to step up and prove that he does deserve his contract. I mean, he's had a lot of time. He had the ideal situation. Number 2 defensive end to Micah Parsons, not getting a lot of double and triple teams, going up against an opportunity one-on-one to be an impact player, and he didn't make the most of that. It now got harder for him because he's going to see more double teams and triple teams, probably not triple teams, but more double teams and chips than he did previously. So he's now going to be asked to have more of an impact while being in a more difficult situation. That's a tough spot to be in. Elvian looked pretty good to me the first few games of the season before injury. I'm still hopeful for him to turn into something. I'm hopeful, but again, I think the injury is what causes me some concern right now. Beat the Bears, get the 2 seed, then beat the Niners at home. If we do that, I'll consider the season a success. I think they'd play either Detroit or Chicago in that opening week, more likely as the 2-7 matchup. But regardless of who they get, beat the Bears this week, try to get the 2 seed, and then see who you ultimately get and try to win that game and take it again, one game at a time. Toys R Us rocks. Thank you for the super chat. To me, this year is harder than 2014 and 2020 because there's so much unknown. We just don't know what's happening or how this will turn out. Before it was just over, I feel like that makes this worse. Before it was just, yeah. It just is a bummer that we don't get to see this team fully operational. And I think that part really sucks. This is a pretty stacked team. And now in a playoff run, you're without Tucker Kraft, Devontae Wyatt, Elton Jenkins, Micah Parsons. That's brutal. You just never really got to see this team its full power because Reed went out early and Watson went out early or was out early. And you just never got to see it fully together, which really, really sucks. All right, Mike, I think our starting defensive ends are Micah and Sorrell next year. When we drafted him, I said Sorrell reminded me of Za'Darius' first year here. I doubt that, Mike. I think it'll be Micah and LVN will be the primary starters, but I think Sorrell will have the opportunity to have a pretty significant role on the team. Missed my victory, Luigi's. Let's get it Sunday. Hey, there's always an opportunity for a Luigi's pizza. It doesn't have to be a victory. It tastes better always with the victory, but it's never, ever, 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 ever a bad time to have a Luigi's pizza. Top 3 passions or hobbies other than talking football and eating Luigi's pizza. Watching my kids in basketball, soccer, football, etc. That's better than the Packers. That's the only thing that probably comes above it. But that's number 1. I have kind of this fun dynasty football league-ish thing that I'll explain someday in huge nerdy detail. That's probably number 2. And then just family time is definitely involved in there, non-sports related. Going on trips, traveling. We just went to New York this past week. Those are probably my top 3. So, hanging out with friends, doing things like that too, but just, not a lot of time for that stuff. So kids and watching their sports, family time, traveling, and, doing my kind of dynasty league stuff with my friend. Those are probably some of the best ones. I have a gut feeling Micah is going to really attack the rehab, come back like Adrian Peterson, come back. I just think it's going to be very similar to Christian Watson, honestly. I think it'll take about the 9 months, but I think he'll come back looking as good, if not better than ever. The grading process is something that I borrowed bits and pieces of from kind of known NFL grading sort of criteria, and then kind of merged it to make it my own thing as well. So there's a little bit of established grading criteria, a little bit of my grading criteria, a little bit of, just how I like to evaluate players and how I've learned some of the scouting stuff. So it's kind of an amalgamation of a lot of different things, if I'm being honest. An Andy marathon is in our future. I don't have any desire to do that at the moment, but if I needed to, I could. I think Watson is pretty important for our path playoffs as a result. 1,000,000%. 1,000,000%. He's a huge, huge important piece for this team. Let me clarify. I'm good with Bullard at the safety. My problem is it's not pass only type down. I have worries with someone else being in the slot because Bullard has been a proven capable tackler. I totally get that, Ben, or we can be in agreement for that. What do you think is bigger, the drop off from Love to Willis or Parsons? Love to Willis. They can win a Super Bowl with Love at quarterback and without Micah. It's going to be really difficult, but I think they can, and they can make a run. They can't. I love Willis as a backup, winning a game here or there. You're not stacking. I'm so sorry. You're not stacking 4 playoff wins together with Malik at quarterback. You're just not. So Love is still more important. Micah's better. Love is more important. Do you think they will activate Cox or Oliver? I think Brenton Cox will get activated. I don't know what to say about Oliver just because we've never seen him, right? He's really intriguing, but he'd be playing his first NFL snaps. So I would go Brenton Cox, and I think it will be Brenton Cox. Gary loves talking and encouraging the defense to step up, but doesn't seem to want to play to that level himself. He's just a really interesting case study of a player. I think he's probably more underrated at this point than overrated. Actually, the Packers overrate Rashawn Gary, and I think the fan base underrates Rashawn Gary. I think that there's probably a balance somewhere in the middle. That's probably where I'd put it. But he's a good player. He's a team captain. He's important to the team. He's just like the 5th or 6th best defender if everyone were healthy, actually. Fun exercise. If you could steal one player from a team that's eliminated right now, not Garrett too obvious, and add to the roster, who would it be? I mean, it's definitely a pass rusher. So, I mean, give me Max Crosby, I guess, in that situation. I'll take somebody like him. As soon as the Lions are eliminated, if they get eliminated, Aiden Hutchinson would be in that conversation. Yeah, I'm trying to think of anybody else. Justin Jefferson would be a fun addition to the team. I wouldn't hate doing that. I know he hasn't had a great year, but that would be a fun addition. But I'll probably, let me just double check something really quick here. Just trying to see if there's anybody else that's been eliminated. I mean, if Trey Hendrickson were healthy, he could be in that conversation as well. Yeah, I would probably go either Max Crosby or Jeffrey Simmons or Justin Jefferson. Give me one of those. Give me one of those would probably be my answer. Let me take one more look at this. If Tampa or Detroit don't make it, then Penei Sewell or Tristan Wirfs could be a really, really good answer to that as well. So those would be the names that would be in my consideration. Go. Yeah, again, Max Crosby, a good player to put on that list. Screw Rashawn. We need Bay and Gary for the playoff. I agree, Mike. Bring him back. So hope we get that version of him. Yeah, Jefferson and Watson together would be very, very fun. Yeah, Jamar Chase. Yeah, I would actually take Chase over Jefferson at this point. So yeah. So if I want a receiver, if I want a playmaker, I'm going Jamar Chase. If I want an offensive lineman, once they're eliminated, if either of them get eliminated, I would go Penei Sewell or Tristan Wirfs. If I want a pass rusher, Trey Hendrickson, if he was healthy, Aiden Hutchinson, if he gets eliminated, Max Crosby, Jeffrey Simmons at defensive tackle. I guess I could look at corner too. I don't know that there's a corner that's going to get eliminated. Trent McDuffie for KC would be a pretty good answer to that question as well. Chris Jones. I don't know how he's playing. I haven't watched Chris Jones too much this year, but Chris Jones could probably be a pretty fun answer to that question too. There'd be some fun options. Oh yeah, Chris Jones. There you go, Gooby. Yeah, and I don't think he's been quite as good, but he's still a really good player. I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. Busy time of year for sure, but doing great. When Kraft went down, I believe you mentioned that while it was a clear downgrade, Musgrave's talents were more suited to be a feature role than a backup. Is there any chance you'd say that about Gary? I asked Mike Wall about that. I don't think so. I can't get that far, but we'll see. We'll see if LVN and Igbari and Gary can pick up the slack. Yeah, the Cowboys aren't eliminated yet. Or sorry, Dexter Lawrence. Yeah, for the Giants. Yeah, that'd be another good one. Yeah, that'd be a really good answer to that. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Yeah, I think that's all I got. Appreciate you guys. A lot of great questions today. One game at a time. Stay positive. Stay hopeful. Should be a fun game against the Bears. Let's go crush some Bears hopes. Be able to talk some smack against some Bears fans. Let's shut them up a little bit. I'd be all for that. But let's take it a game at a time and enjoy the game this week. I'll have live pre and post game shows coming up on Saturday. We'll have our usual slate of episodes this week. Grades on Thursday, Justice on Thursday, Farrington and Brettel tomorrow. So lots of great stuff coming up. I'll see you guys all very, very soon. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.